Africa's economy in 2020, my colleague Rachelle Akuffo spoke to Africa security and policy analyst Abdullahi Boru Halakhe. He began by pointing out the potential standout economies in the year ahead.
Three countries stand out. One is Sudan. After over 30 years of, very centralized rule of Omar Hassan al-Bashir, people in Sudan went onto the streets, mostly women, young men, people from the diaspora, and Omar Hassan al-Bashir right now is awaiting trial. And in this place, we have an interim government that has got, a transitional period of 3 years, led by a former, economist. He's been going around the world, selling Sudan as, the next step. That is going to take a while, but that is one that we need to watch very closely because, as it is, a good economic plan without good political environment doesn't necessarily yield much. So both are going on at the same time. Transition by their very definition are incredibly complicated, but is a competent person that is being trusted by all players and stakeholders inside and outside Sudan. That is one to watch. The other one is Ethiopia. After decades of a centralized rule by a Marxist-leaning EPDRF, people went in the streets, mostly youth, and said, no, this is not going to go on. The Prime Minister stepped aside. A young Prime Minister, 43-year-old Ahmed Abiy, came in. Things are going in the right direction. They're going to have an election next year for his effort of energizing, ensuring that people imagine that not just a different Ethiopia, but a different Africa is going to be realized. The other one is Angola. After Dos Santos' rule of decades, stepped aside for health reasons, João Lourenço came in, and his move, not just purging corruption, but going after Dos Santos was very significant. And those are the three countries in the continent. There are many others, but those are the three that are standing out. If this momentum, reform momentum, holds, then we are looking at good prospects because all of them are, big countries with big potential.
Now, some people might be surprised that South Africa and Nigeria didn't top your list, obviously, as those biggest economies in Africa. How do you expect them to fare in 2020, and what are some of the challenges that they're up against?
Let's start with South Africa. I think South Africa, when Ramaphosa came in, there was a fair degree of euphoria, if we will, but that euphoria has died. And that is down to poor economic management, but also a great deal of people not realizing how years of Zuma's rule, or if you will, misrule, really impacted South Africa. And the elephant in the room is the largest utility company, Eskom. And in the last quarter, the economy has shrunk by 0.6%. And in this latest round of, load shedding that they've announced, they are cutting 6,000 megawatts from the national grid. So you're looking at a country that is so reliant on electricity for so many other mining and all, where mining companies are saying they're stopping, all the work at night. So South Africa's economic prospect is not something to be looked at in a positive light. There are others even who are going forward and saying that we are staring into a recession. So South Africa, Nigeria, I think, similar story. With Buhari, there was a fair degree of optimism. Nigeria is going to take off. His war on corruption is going to bear, fruits. I don't think we've seen that. What we've seen instead is a stagnation of Nigeria. Yes, oil prices have started picking up, but load shedding is still a problem in Nigeria, and I think both countries are going to really struggle to hit their strides in the economic prospects in 2020.
And it's interesting because with those two countries obviously so reliant, you want their economies to grow, you need the power, you need a consistent energy source. But you also have startup communities popping up in different countries on the continent. You have Sheba Valley in Ethiopia. So talk a little bit about the role of technology on the continent, being that you still sort of have some of these underlying problems with the power outages.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that, Africa tends to defy single story. With all these, government's problem that we are having, since 2015, we've had over 26 peaceful transfer of power, but also there is a young, vibrant, positive energy that is not reliant on the state, and it's largely trying to charter its own ways. But the reality is, all the time, my sense is this gloss over the structural problems. I'm not saying that we shouldn't celebrate. We should damn celebrate some of these good prospects, be it in transport, be it in energy, be it in education. If you look at Kenya, it's becoming something of a hub. But the problem is, those things cannot be a substitute for a strong state. Those things cannot be a substitute for a strong private sector. They can provide, some relief. They provide employment, right. But the reality is they cannot be a substitute for states, for state authorities and institutions that are really not, operating at their optimal capacity. And so, whereas I am absolutely delighted that we have all these pockets of good news, particularly around technology, be it education, health, even some of the novels and plays that are coming from Africa are really vibrant. But you look on the other side, you have, states, authorities that have ossified and not responding to their demands.
So then you raise an interesting point then, being that the different countries are at different levels when it comes to sort of how they rule regionally. What does that mean then for the pursuit of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement? How do you see that progressing in 2020?
It is, in theory, a really wonderful idea. In theory, it's a wonderful idea. But like with all good theories, it is going to be determined by its implementation. If Nigeria, the biggest player in ECOWAS region, closes its border to, because all our country is being flooded by rice from our neighboring countries, that doesn't really mean a great deal. And this comes back to the inter-Africa trade that is very critical. If in most of these African countries you need a visa to travel, you need to probably, for instance, if you come from the east, you have to go to Europe for you to come back to, to go and visit West Africa. All these little barriers that, if they are taken out of the way, could really energize is not there. I will hold my judgment. I am on the optimistic side of it, but I am not 100% certain that I won't be disappointed.